In this video, we'll explore Node.js, including modules, Node Package Manager, and setting up servers. Let's go. All right, guys, welcome. For this tutorial, it's best to have at least a basic understanding of JavaScript in order to follow along with everything we'll be doing. If this is the first time you ever see JavaScript, you'll probably pick up some things here and there, so you're welcome to keep watching. We'll be working with Node.js. Node is a JavaScript runtime. It's essentially a way to run JavaScript outside of a browser, and like it says on the screen, run JavaScript everywhere. So there are some jargon-heavy definitions of Node. I'm not going to get into all of that. I just want to show you what this thing does and how you can use it. So nodejs.org, that's where we can download Node. So click on this download button to download the installer. And once it's installed, you want to make sure that Node is added to your environment variables. So in your system properties, go to environment variables and then path here, and make sure that the path to Node is added here. Okay. Once that's done, we can open a shell and we can check that Node is installed by checking for the version with node v, and that'll show us the version that's installed. And then we can actually just start working with JavaScript by typing node, and then we can just start writing JavaScript. So let's say console log, let's say hello Node.js, and that'll console log hello Node.js. All right, so great. Let's exit out of this and let's create our first script. So let's open VS Code, and I'm going to use git bash. And so let's create our first script. I'm just going to call it script.js. And let's create a simple function. We'll make it a greet function that takes in a name, and it'll return a greeting. Say hello and give it the name, and then we can console log greet and then give it a name, say Alice. Save this, and then we can run this script with node and then script name script.js in this case, and we'll see that console log there. Node takes full advantage of JavaScript modularity. So it comes with a slew of built-in modules, and we can also create our own modules. So let's start exploring some of those. Let's create a file, call it modules.js. And the first module I'd like to introduce is the operating system module. It's abbreviated OS, and it allows us to interact with the operating system. So there are a couple different ways to import this OS module, and I'll be using ES6 syntax. So it looks like this: import OS from OS, just like that. So there's a common JavaScript way of doing it, which is const something like this: const OS require OS, and that would accomplish the same thing. I'm just using this other syntax. So we'll say OS, and we can use dot notation to access its methods. So the first method I'll show is platform, and this gives us the operating system platform that we're working with. So if we set this equal to const, say operating system, and we console log operating system, and then we run this node modules, we'll see the operating system console log there. Okay, we can also ask for the CPU architecture, for example. So we could do that with arc, save that, run, and then we can see the CPU architecture there. We can ask for the total memory of the system, the total mem, save, run, and we can see the total memory in bytes and so on. All right, another very commonly used package is path. path allows us to work with file and directory paths. And for this, let me bring in our current directory. And I'll bring that in from process.cwd. And we'll create an example file. So say touch example.txt. And let's imagine I want the file path to this file. So we can use path and say path.join current directory with example.txt, and we set that equal to file path, and then we console log file path, save and run, and we can see the file path there. Okay. Something else we can do is, for example, get the directory name. So if we give it the file path here, and then we can console log the directory name, that gives us the directory name. We can also ask for the file extension. So we can say extension name, run it, and that'll give us the extension for that file. Another very commonly used module is the file system module. So we can import fs from fs. And with the file system module, we can work with files directly, including reading and writing to files. So say, for example, this file, I added some text and say, this is some text, right? Save that. And now with fs, we can read that content. So we can say fs read file, give it the file, example.txt, give it the encoding is UTF-8, and then we'll have a function here, error data, and then an arrow function, and say if error throw error, and then just console log the data, right? And this will console log the contents of that file, right? And you can see there's some text there. We can also write to a file. So let's create some text to write, and we'll say write this text to a file. And now we can give it this text to write. We'll change this to write file, and then we'll get rid of this data, and then we'll just console log wrote text to file, and we'll comment this out. And now when we run that, we'll see wrote text to file, and then this file will have that write this text to file, right? Okay, so those are some built-in modules. We can also create our own modules. So let's create a module that just does some simple math. Let's say touch math.js, and we'll create a function here, function add, and we'll just add two numbers, a and b. And so we'll say a plus b, and this will return that. And let's create another function for subtract, okay? And what we'll do is we'll export each one of these, right? Export. And now that we're exporting these files, we can import them here. So we'll say import add subtract from, and then just give it the path math.js. And now we can use these two functions. So say we console log add, give it two numbers, 5 and 3, and then we can also do that for subtract, and we should see the result of each one of those functions when we run this file. So we see 8 and 2. Okay, so custom modules, we can create our own custom modules. One of the core features of Node is its extensive library of third-party modules. And the default package manager for all of those modules is the Node Package Manager, or NPM. So let's explore NPM. Let's go ahead and create a file. I'll call it npm.js. And the first NPM I'd like to introduce is called Lodash. Lodash is a utility that helps us work with strings and objects and functions. It has a bunch of helper functions. And the way that we install Lodash is calling on NPM. So we'll say npm install Lodash. Okay. And what you'll notice is this creates a couple of files and a directory here. So the first is the package.json, which keeps track of all of the packages that are installed and their versions. Package lock.json, which locks the version, which is helpful in particular in collaborative environments. You want to make sure everybody's working on the same version. And then the node modules themselves. So you see Lodash is in here and all these functions are in there, right? Okay, so let's go back to npm.js and import, and I'll say just underscore from Lodash. And so what can we do? So one example, let's say we have an array of objects and we want to search for one of those objects given a property. So let's do that. Let's create an array. We'll call it users. And here we'll have our first user, call him Barney. And then we'll say age 33. And let's create a couple more users. We'll say this user is 55 and then 22. And this will be Amy. And this will be Frank. Okay. Now, again, let's say we wanted to find a user according to their age. So we can say lodash.find, give it the users, and then say find it according to age, where age is 22. So we should see Frank. So const user. Okay, and now we console log user, save, run node npm, and we see Frank here. And we also see this message here screaming at me, and it's saying that the type should be module because we're using ES6 syntax. And so what we need to do is go into our package.json and say type, and then just select module. And then if we run that again, that message will be gone. Okay, so what else can we do with Lodash? We can sort the users. So we can say Lodash.sort by, and give it the users, and say we want to sort by age, right? So we can say const sorted users, and then we'll just console log sorted users, run this, and we can see the users sorted by age. Yeah. Say we had an array of non-unique numbers. So something like 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. And we wanted just the unique numbers. So we can use Lodash here as well. We can say unique, give it numbers, and say const unique numbers, and now console log unique numbers, and then when we run this, we should see only the unique numbers, and so on. So Lodash, pretty useful. What else can we do with Node? We can set up servers. So a server is a computer or a system that provides data or performs some action for a client. So it's designed to receive requests and and give a response of some data or perform some action. So let's create a server. We'll say touch server.js, and then we'll import HTTP, a built-in module here. And let's create a server. We'll call it server, and we'll say http.createServer. And this will take in a request and give a response. And the response first must have the header. So we'll say write head, and we'll give it a status of 200 and a content type of text plain. And then res.end will be what we'll see in the browser when we make an HTTP request to the server at the given port. So we'll say hello Node.js server. All right. So now let's get the server listening on a port. So we'll say server.listen, and let's set up a port here. We'll say port const port equal to 3000. And let's give it the port. Okay. And we'll console log server running on port, and then just give it the port. Okay. So this should work. Let's say node server run, and now it says server running on port 3000. If we open a browser and navigate to localhost 3000, make an HTTP request, we should see that hello message. So we'll go to localhost 3000, and there it is. Okay. So another thing that we can do here is set up routes. So we can read from the request the URL that's coming in, right? So we'll say if request.url is coming to the home page, then let's do that. Else if request.url is coming to the about page, then let's give it this. But then let's just say about us. And another thing that we can do here is actually write HTML. So we can change plain to HTML, and then we can, I'll just do an H1 here. And let's close this, and then do the same here. Close. And then we'll say else. Let's do this, but instead now we'll have a response of 400, and we'll say page not found. So any request that's not going to about or the home page will see this. Okay. Okay, so all of that looks fine. Let's say node server, and we'll go back to the browser, and now when we refresh, we'll see this. Then about, we see that. And let's say we try to navigate some page we haven't set up yet, like a blog or something, and we'll see page not found. Okay. Now there's another way to create servers that's very popular, and that's using an NPM called Express. Express is sort of a minimal framework, and it makes setting up servers pretty easy. So let's explore Express. Let's say touch express.js, and we'll say import. Actually, first we need to install. So npm install express, and then we'll import express from express, and then we'll create an app. Let's say const app equals express, and then we'll say app.get the homepage route, we'll take in a request, have a response, have an arrow function. We'll say response.send, and we can just start writing our HTML. So say h1 hello express JS and another h1. And we can set up routes here as well. So we'll do another one for about, and this will be about us. And we can also set up actual API endpoints. So we can say API/data, and we can respond with JSON. So we'll say response.json, and we can actually start writing JSON here. So curly braces, we'll say message, hello, JSON, and status, we'll say success. And now let's get this app to listen on a port. Let's set up our port, const port 3000, give it the port, and then arrow function, console log, and server running on port 3000. Sometimes my typing gets a little overzealous, as you can tell. Okay, so that looks fine. Let's run Node Express server running on port 3000. So if we open our browser back up, go to the home page, it says hello Express, and then if we say about, we'll see that, and then if we go to our API endpoint, we'll see our JSON, right? Okay, so one thing to note here is that if we make any changes to our data over here, the changes don't immediately reflect. So if we save this file and then refresh the page, if I remove this exclamation mark, so that exclamation mark is still there. Okay, so how do we get around that? We want to be able to make a change and have it reflect immediately. So there's a package for that. It's called NodeMon. So let's install that. Let's say NPM install NodeMon. Okay. And now what we do is we set up a script here in our package JSON. We'll say scripts. We'll say start NodeMon express JS. All right. So when we run npm start, it will run express.js with NodeMon. Okay. So let's go ahead and run that. Well, let's go ahead and run npm start. And we can see NodeMon's invoked, and now Express.js is running on port 3000. So if we go back here, refresh, okay, if we add this exclamation mark back in, save, now refresh, and it's there. So this makes it a lot easier to work with your applications in development. Okay, so what else can we do with Node? We can run unit tests. Okay, unit tests are ways to test your code for expected output, right? So let's run some unit tests on our math functions. So we'll say touch test.js, and let's just say test. We'll call this addition works correctly, and we'll have an arrow function. And we'll say assert, we need that from Node, assert.strict equal. So we're checking for strict equality between something that we're going to give the addition function and an expected output. So 5 and 3 should give us 8. And let's import add and subtract from /math.js. Okay, and let's do one for subtraction as well. So subtract, and we'll say subtraction. And we want to make sure that 5 minus 3 is 2. And then we'll set up one to make sure that addition fails when expected as well. So we'll say addition fails when expected. And we'll say here's not strict equal. Not strict equal, and when we add 5 and 3, it shouldn't be 2. There. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run these tests. So node test, and we can see all 3 tests passed. Okay, what else can we do? We can hash data with Node. Okay, so let's create a file for hashing. We'll say hash.js, and let's create an async function. We'll say async function. Didn't want all of that. We'll say hash file. So we'll hash a file, give it a file name. And let's create a hasher. And we'll say create hash. And we'll use algorithm SHA1. And then we'll say hasher.set encoding to hexadecimal. Oops. And then let's grab the content. So we'll say content is equal to, we're going to await read file, and we're going to give it the file name. And this read file must come from promises because we're using await. And then we'll say hasher.write content, and then hasher.end. And then we'll return hasher.read. So that'll read that hash and then give it to us, and then we can invoke hash file, and let's just give it the package JSON, set up a promise, and then we'll say hash console log hash. Okay, so let's run this, and then that gives us that hash. Okay. Finally, I'd like to introduce streams. So streams are a way to process data in parts or in chunks. So this is in particular useful when we're working with very large data sets, very large file, or with like network data. So let's create a file. We'll call it stream.js. And let's go ahead and start with an async function. And we'll call it process file. We're going to process a file here. And we'll await pipeline. And again, this needs to come from promises. So we'll await this pipeline, and what we're going to do is read a file, and let's just read the example.txt, and then transform the content to uppercase, and then compress the file, and then write it to our directory. So the first thing we want is to create a read stream, and we'll give it example.txt. And then we want to transform this, so we'll say new transform, and we'll say transform, and this will have a chunk, encoding, and then a callback. And then the callback will have null, error, and then chunk, we'll say toString, and then dot to uppercase. And then we can create gzip to compress, and then create write stream to write it, and we'll write it to an output. Say output.text.gz. Okay, and actually we want all of this in a try catch block. So let's do this: try catch error, and we'll say here console.error pipeline failed error. Okay, and then if all goes well, we'll console log we'll say file transformation and compression complete. All right, and then we'll just call on process file. So we'll say process file, run that. So I think everything looks good here. That should work. So we'll say node and say stream, and we have an error here. Example.text pipeline failed. Create read and write. So FS, I think, does this have to come from promise? I don't think so. No. So example.text. Oh, there's a simple typo here. Okay, so now the transformation compression complete. All right, guys, that's it for Node. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that was helpful. If it was, please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.